Super fighting robot. Mega Man. Super fighting robot. Mega Man. Well, that was a terrible idea. I know y'all have been craving videos of me talking about classic games again, if my viewership is to be believed. So this time around, we'll be looking at classic Mega Man games, also known as Rockman in Japan, because I know someone will bring it up in the comments if I don't mention it here. And of course, we're starting off with Mega Man 1. Now, I know y'all don't know this about me, since I've never really brought it up. I'm actually a huge Mega Man fan, though this was more so before they stopped making them for a decade. My introduction to the series was with Mega Man.Stream 2 on Game Boy, and after that I had mostly stuck with Battle Network and Zero and the ZX games. I consider myself a fan of pretty much every Mega Man sub-series with the exception of, well, 90% of the X games. Except X1, which is basically objectively perfect. Anyway, Mega Man 1, this is a title I'm pretty mixed on. Among the 2D Mega Man games, I'd definitely say I'm partial towards the classic series. But among them, Mega Man 1 is one of the weaker entries. But I suppose you'll get a better feel for where it lies among the classics once I've covered the rest of the series. Suffice it to say, yeah, it's alright. For the sake of this critique series, I'm going to be looking at the Legacy Collection version. While I'm partial toward the bonus content found in the GameCube PS2 Mega Man Classic Collection, Legacy performs far better and has a variety of display and gameplay options, and has many quality of life improvements which make returning to the more annoying segments easier to stomach, not least of which is the rewind function. I'd have saved mentioning this for later, but you're no doubt going to see footage rewinding itself throughout the critique, and I might as well explain it up front. Yes, a rewind function, a feature applicable to everything in the Legacy Collection. It basically serves like Prince of Persia, or perhaps more appropriately, Braid's rewind mechanic, in which, rather than using checkpoints or save states, you literally rewind everything you've done to present, so long as you hold down the rewind button. I actually love this addition. Not only does it remove a lot of the annoyances of NES jank, but it reduces the iteration time on retries. Most importantly, it made fighting the Yellow Devil less of a horrific nightmare of a process, and if you can make that a less than painful experience, you're clearly doing something right. I honestly feel like rewind mechanics need to be included in more retro game re-releases, mostly NES and game consoles of the era that sported those levels of jank. Now, the fact that I use the feature may call into question my integrity as a gamer. Moving on. There isn't much of a story when it comes to Mega Man, if the game is to be believed. Much like my Zelda and Metroid videos, I'm only going to cover the story that the game chooses to tell, regardless of whether or not I'm aware of the story through external media. Though it's not like Mega Man's story is particularly complicated. You are the super fighting robot, Mega Man! Every robot that's not you is bad, kill they ass. There's a bit more than that, but that's all you're given from the start, and the classic series starts as it means to go on. You fight through these robot masters, as they are called, and ultimately end up in a confrontation with the game's main antagonist, Dr. Wily. You beat him, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, the story is pretty insubstantial, but it doesn't really need to be. Like a lot of games of the era, the story is basically just there to have an excuse to fight things on a level-by-level basis. The Mega Man franchise would try to explore storytelling in greater depth, but thankfully we're nowhere near that. So, gameplay. What do? Jump and shoot. Big surprise. Yeah, it's a relatively straightforward platformer. You jump and shoot and don't have a charge shot yet. So, being a relatively simple platformer, a lot of the points of interest in the gameplay lie in the level and boss design. Though there is a bit to say about jumping and shooting. This being the first game in the series, it's obviously going to be a bit clunky. For the most part, the foundation built by the game has stuck around for over 2 decades. But this particular iteration isn't without its faults. Now, nothing here is nearly on par with the faults of Metroid or Zelda 1. I'm not entirely sure why that is. It could very well just be because it came out a year later and there was a better frame of reference by which to build the game. Or indeed, it could have just been that the game was a level-based 2D platformer, meaning the game as a whole was more focused on the core mechanics and constructing the game around those. But as I said, it's not without its faults, and the most immediate example is the weird physics glitch unique to Mega Man 1. Under most circumstances, if you jump or walk off a ledge, fall speed applies normally, but if you're on a moving platform enemy, or the magnet beam and fall off, the game rapidly accelerates you into the abyss below. I can only speculate on why this is, but if I had to guess, I assume it's the result of the game treating Mega Man as though he was already at ground level, and tries to resolve that with the action of you stepping off the ledge by placing you at what the game thinks is your Y-axis point. And I'm a bit surprised this issue hadn't been resolved in the re-releases. It's a lot more annoying in other releases of the game, but if you're playing Legacy, the rewind feature renders the problem, as well as every other problem, moot. Beyond that, the mechanics are fine. I've always been particularly fond of Mega Man's jump, and how you always have an accurate sense of where you'll land with no need to worry about momentum. The jump arc is a lot simpler, and the game is programmed to start your movement at 0 upon landing, meaning even ice physics are no match. Sorry, I got a bit carried away there. The shooting is fine. It's fair. And I'm talking about the P shooter here. If there's any problem with it, it's similar to the issues with Samus and Metroid 1, where enemies don't really feel like they were all that well designed with the concept in mind. Granted, Mega Man's issue isn't nearly as bad, since you're not going to be taking nearly as much damage, and the other weapons you unlock mitigate the issue pretty quickly. I'm sure some of you are aware, though probably not all of you, but arguably the biggest feature that makes Kirby stand out from other mascots is his copy ability. Wait, what? No, did I mix up the scripts? God damn it. Yes, Mega Man! Mega Man's copy ability. Upon defeating a boss, Mega Man acquires a weapon for his arsenal based on the boss's signature move. This gets ridiculously expansive in terms of variety. I like Man's Thunder Beam as a personal favorite since that's effective for hitting just about anything in your way, and it could originally be used for a Yellow Devil hit glitch, though it no longer seems to work in the Legacy collection. Cutman's Rolling Cutter is fairly underrated if you ask me. A bit overly precise, but it's a solid way of dealing with hazards. Fireman's Firestorm doubles as a slightly stronger buster and a short-range shield, though the Ice Slayer, Hyper Bomb, and Super Arm are a bit too situational for their own good. But there is something to be said about the Magnet Beam. It's fantastic. Sometimes it feels a bit like cheating to use it, but it's very liberating to be able to just completely ignore troublesome platforming sections by simply creating your own path. It's not useful in a fight, but who cares? It's awesome. While flawed, the expansive moveset more than makes up for the dubious basic Mega Buster. But what's a good arsenal without enemies to fight them with? Let's talk about bosses. There's not a whole lot to say, to be honest. Most of them are pretty straightforward, so I'm mostly just doing this to highlight Fireman, which is unequivocally the worst boss in the game. Worst boss, you might be saying. Surely you jest! Surely it's the Yellow Devil that wrestles your jimmies more than anything. Well, that's a very strange way to articulate that, but a fair point. And why do I think Fireman is worse? It's simple, really. It's because Yellow Devil follows a strict pattern for his attacks. He can be extremely punishing, certainly, but once you have his pattern down, you have it down. Fireman, on the other hand, just seems to fire wave upon wave of firestorm with seemingly no pattern, and it makes it pretty much impossible to avoid taking damage from it. This makes the final boss area particularly annoying when you're having to face them again while trying to maintain HP for the rest of the boss rush. But I must admit this is a relatively minor blemish on an otherwise decent game. Other than that, the visuals aren't much to speak of. I'll say it has a stronger aesthetic compared to the original Metroids and Zeldas on NES, but I don't think that the classic Mega Man art style has really come into its own at this point in the series. But that's something we'll talk about later. But I gotta say, the Astro Boy chibi style works surprisingly well on NES. The music is pretty decent as well, but apart from the boss intro theme, I can't really think of many tracks that really grabbed me. I'd say it was perfectly serviceable for a first entry. And yes, I know, Mega Man 2, we'll get to that, but this is where we'll leave it for now. Perhaps it's just the Legacy Collection's rewind feature, but I feel far less bitter towards this title than I used to. I can definitely recommend playing Mega Man 1 as it holds up fairly well. It's completely doable with or without the rewind feature. The rewind just helps ease on the frustration. I wouldn't exactly call Mega Man 1 a strong start for the series, but it's a solid one. A rock solid one. Yeah, I'll see myself out.